I did, I got it all fixed.
Thank you.
Public comment cards.
Here, I have more.
Madam Mayor,
How are these
It's-
separated?
This is consent, or regular public participation.
Of non-agenda items?
Correct. And these are the new business ones, but I don't know if those have been split up.
I don't know.
Here, I can.
Okay, I think we're up and running, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, it's 6:16. We're live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Thursday, March 19th, special City Commission meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo,
Here?
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso,
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell,
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy,
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge, led by Commissioner Robinson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. For all of those who are calling in on our telephone conferencing number, this is not a number to make comments. The blue cards online are to be used and they will be monitored, so if we get them on time, your comments will be read into the record. Please make sure your phone has been muted, as the background noise will disturb the meeting. Thank you very much. Now, if you are here tonight and have filled out the blue cards and put them in the basket outside the chamber, your name will be called and you can come into the chamber and you may speak for 3 minutes on public participation of non-agended items and consent agenda items, and for 2 minutes on any agended item. I would like to remind everyone also that the 2020 census is going on, and I know these are trying times, but we want to remind everyone, if you can, while you're home and you're caring for your loved ones and being safe, that you will also think about filling out the census, because every vote will really count in the census. Every person count, every woman, man, child. Please, our city needs it. Thank you. I also want to, out of respect and concern for our citizens, our staff, and fellow commissioners who are here in the building, I'm going to follow a procedure which will hopefully minimize the coronavirus risk to all. First, each agenda item which will be voted on, I will take public comment first. After we receive public comment, I will then entertain a motion. After the motion is seconded, each commissioner will have a total of 5 minutes to speak on that item. Each commissioner will have one opportunity to speak. There will be no second bite of the apple. And after all 5 of us have had an opportunity to speak on the item, I will then ask the clerk to call for a vote on that motion.
Point of inquiry, point of information.
Yes?
That's not what's articulated in our rules and procedures. When did we suspend those?
It's a special meeting and it's a special circumstance.
I'm sorry.
So for special meetings, I don't know, City Attorney?
Madam Mayor, the rules that the commission has laid out do not specify a time frame for speaking. Robert's Rules of Order also do not specify a time frame for speaking, so it's within the chair's discretion to keep the meeting in an orderly procession and keep the meeting going quickly as possible to get us all out of here. It's within her discretion to make that call.
Hold on one second. So what you're saying is that the rules don't specify a time limit on speaking,
Correct.
but the chair can make up a time limit on speaking.
Correct.
So what other rules can the chair make up?
Rules that are not specifically addressed in your rules or in Robert's Rules of Order.
So she can make new rules
Right, and
by herself.
if you don't agree with the chair's rules of how to orderly proceed the meeting, you can certainly appeal the decision of the chair.
That I guess what's the point of us having written and voted on rules if the chair can just change them by herself?
Madam Mayor, to clarify, she's not changing a rule. We don't have a specific rule on a time frame.
So is adding a rule changing the body of rules that exist? You just said she can make up a new rule about time limits.
She could fill gaps in the rules to keep the meeting proceeding in an orderly fashion. I think given the circumstances we're all under here, I think we all want to get out of here as quick as possible.
I don't think that that's the case. I think, some of us want to get business done, but I'm glad that that's on the record, because I have never heard such a thing in my entire life. But I would ask, given that this is an important meeting,
We're here to discuss emergency powers in an emergency, and other cities have held meetings just like this one. They did not impose these limits. And given the fact that also I requested such a meeting last week, and that we have lots of issues to cover, and given that I feel that the 5-minute limit on there has less to do with us trying to get out of here quickly and more to do with us not trying to explore these issues, I don't think it's a good idea to arbitrarily create a new rule that limits discussion to 5 minutes per commissioner when we've never done that before, when it's not in our rules, and when, in my opinion, that's not interpreting a rule, that's not filling a gap, that's creating a new rule altogether. I think there's a difference between interpretation and creation, or interpretation and legislation, and so I would ask that we not limit commissioner comments in probably the most important meeting we've ever had in our lives, perhaps the most important meeting this body has ever had, given the nature of this global pandemic, to 5 minutes per commissioner.
It actually isn't a reinvention of a rule. It's a 30-minute rule that we've had on the record, which is that it goes to workshop. So it was just organized in 5-minute sections because after 30 minutes it would go to workshop. So to prevent that from happening, I was suggesting that we have the 5 minutes on that.
That is, well, I just want to put on the record, I don't believe that we've been well advised in this matter
Okay,
at
thank you.
all.
All right, public participation. I'm sorry, Mr. Robinson.
Well, under the consent agenda, I wanted to have an explanation of item A.
I would also like to pull items B through I. Not consent on those items, therefore they must be pulled.
So is that a motion?
That's not a, we don't do motions on consent. There's not
so-
consent.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as amended. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay?
That-
Nay.
That's not, hold on one sec, that's not how the consent agenda works. The consent agenda is the stuff that the commission agrees on. It takes one commissioner to not agree on it, to pull something from the consent agenda.
You have to agree on the consent agenda as amended, and there was a vote on that, and it just negative.
Well, it was my understanding that any commissioner could pull any item without
Consent,
a
yeah.
vote.
And that's what we've done before in the past.
We have
Madam Mayor,
numerously
if I
done.
may, according to your rules, if someone is to want to change the agenda as presented for the meeting, there is to be taken a vote on changing the agenda as set. Otherwise, you don't take a vote.
Well, my intention was not to change the agenda, it was just to get an explanation of item A. I'm not asking for, and I don't mean to be contrary or anything else. This is what I considered a meeting that we would do business at. We're asking for consent on a lot of money. And the public, I got a request to get an explanation of Palm Beach County Issues Forum, which I've never heard of. And apparently there's been meetings that, have we had a representative at?
And especially, yeah, sorry.
And
Continue, please.
so I
So make another motion.
I wasn't making a motion. I wanted an explanation of
You have to make a motion to have an explanation because you're moving something from consent agenda to an item. So you have to make a motion to move.
We've already voted.
Okay, well, just, point of information, who wrote those procedures that we're operating under right now? Like where did those come,
First
the
of all, I
5-minute
didn't
rule?
call your name, and there's no
Okay,
possibility of you talking to me. What is it about? It's 30-minute rule.
but who wrote those procedures?
I wrote them.
You devised them yourself, you came up with them yourself?
It's first of all, you have no right to even interrogate me right now from the. from the
I think I know where they came from.
You don't.
Okay,
so back to my
We're going to go on. We're going to move on for public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda items. And
so
those,
the public doesn't get an explanation of item A.
we can address that at a different time, but not right at this moment because it was voted down.
when we're voting on it?
We're
So in the
moving on.
future, we'll be voting for when somebody pulls in the future a consent agenda item that will be voted on.
Every time?
We have done so in the past. We've had a vote to accept the agenda as amended every single time. Every meeting we've done it. Every meeting. If somebody makes an amendment, we vote on it every time. This is nothing new.
Okay.
Okay, first up, this is non-agenda items. Hold on. Is this non-agenda?
It should say consent.
But these all have, but look at the comments.
Yeah, but see, it says consent, so that would mean non-agenda.
Right, but look at the comments. Go to each one.
I know they filled it out, I guess.
But that's not consent.
Okay, then you could put them on new business.
Okay.
And there might be some duplicates, unfortunately.
This is new business here. And what was the third one? One was new business, and then this one doesn't have that line.
That has nothing at all. It was just an email. These are all new business. But there might be, if you want me to go through them and make.
Yeah,
them
please.
There's another consent.
But look at the,
Yeah, it's really not consent.
these
This
are
is the
not.
first time they filled out cards online, so they may have some issues with
They don't know what it says.
Here, do you want this other stack too?
Yeah, I'll go through it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a brief break while we reorganize the consent agenda. On my cards.
Madam Mayor, would it be appropriate to have a conversation?
Not at this point, we're just having a,
Okay.
thanks. Are there any?
No,
Or no public participation of non-agenda items?
no, I think they all have to be.
Okay, recognizing that there are none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-2. Moving on now to new business. We're going to read public comments for new business. City Attorney, did you want to? This item is resolution number 11-2020, Mayor's and City Managers' Emergency Powers.
It doesn't have to be.
Would you read it, please? Mhm.
Resolution number 11-2020 of the City of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, providing that the mayor may declare a local state of emergency as needed, providing that the city manager may suspend, cancel, or reschedule non-essential public meetings and outside events and services, may limit access to non-essential city facilities and services, and may address other matters for efficient and safe operations of the city's business and for the health, safety, and welfare of the city's residents and the public at large during a federal, state, county, and/or local emergency, providing for severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
Thank you very much. City Manager?
I'm sorry, is he going to be limited to 5 minutes as well?
Yeah.
Mayor and Commission, this resolution, as the title indicates, addresses a couple of issues.
that had become apparent and in question about the activities related to the declaration of emergencies as provided for the mayor, as well as my operational duties as the chief administrative officer for the city. First, by practice over the years that we have all been here, and currently, the ability of the mayor to actually, and the declaration of emergency has been something we've been doing and probably has been doing long before we got here. I think that there's a concern that the verbiage in the charter is not as specific as some people would prefer. And as the attorney who has given us legal advice on this and legal advice to the commissioner that's been concerned about this repeatedly, the areas within the specifics of the charter provide for these kinds of interpretations through practice and through action. And in this case, we have always had the city mayor sign this declaration. This resolution is an attempt to clarify and reaffirm that. We've had some questions about why the city hasn't declared a state of emergency, which is kind of funny. We're talking about that authority and that we're acting sort of willy-nilly with the current pandemic. I just want to clarify that we're acting in a state of emergency as declared by the federal and the state levels, which we have the ability to do. The state of declaration that the city covers really gets into more specifically dealing with union contracts and how we address emergencies within the city limits of Lake Worth Beach. And that would cover things that we normally deal with, like hurricanes. It could cover things like terrorist attacks, train derailments, or any kind of activity where we would need to activate the employees in A and B shifts to really hunker down here within the city and spend the time, effort, and energy needed to resolve whatever those emergencies are. And that's our local emergency declaration. It has a set of activities that really at this kind of a pandemic response is not something that's relevant. And the activities that we're proceeding with are covered under the national and state emergency declarations. So we are addressing the situation. It's a different kind of declaration that most people don't understand. And that's what your authority would grant us by granting that declaration. I hope that clarifies why we haven't declared a state of emergency technically as provided for the city of Lake Worth Beach at this time. As far as my responsibility as a city manager, operationally is kind of a large term for the abilities that I have traditionally exercised under emergencies. Every year we've had hurricanes and the declarations, whether it's federal, state, or local. Operationally, I have been able to move with a lot of nimbleness and have the ability to adapt to changing circumstances in real time in many cases, without having to be saddled with the idea that there would be a running policy meeting having all these issues constantly brought back before the policy board. It's a logistic impossibility to do that effectively. And if you look at the way the pandemic is unfolding right now, and you look at what's coming out of Washington and the state and the county, it changes constantly, changes hour by hour. And the ability to adapt to that is something that the city manager as chief executive officer for this organization needs the ability to address on a going basis without having to stop, wait for some decision from the policy board, and then as circumstances change, maybe get an answer that doesn't fit the circumstance because it's moved. It's not something in my career as city manager that I've ever had an issue with any emergencies that I've worked with. And I was here after 9/11 and dealing with the emergencies we dealt with there, after Francis, Wilma, and Jean in 2005 and 2004, after the bird flu avian pandemic, which taught us a lot of lessons, and most recently the hurricanes that we've been dealing with. This is a system that works. It's not a usurpation of any kind of authority. We're talking about operational issues, closing buildings, adopting certain personnel policies, waiving fines and fees that may be relevant, adjusting hours of operation. That's what this authorizes and formalizes and reaffirms
Thank you very
to
much.
address that issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
I would certainly like to modify the time limits on the city manager's explanation. You know, this time thing is, I don't want, it's not.
You can ask questions and you can answer them.
Well, I'm not sure that he was finished explaining.
Okay. Do you have any questions you want to ask him directly?
Well, I had some comments. I don't necessarily.
I have some questions.
Did you have something?
I would like to then reserve my right to speak without a question.
Did you have something? I'm sorry.
I have some questions. Mr. City Manager, you said the declaration doesn't deal with union contracts. Is it the case typically that emergency declarations differ based on the emergency?
The city's declaration is what I was referring to.
Right. What declaration are you referring to?
I'm referring to that, which is what is
Where does it
addressed in this
exist?
resolution. This declaration here that's enumerated,
That's not a declaration.
consistent with the city's past practice of having the mayor issue a declaration of emergency under this article.
Uh-huh.
It's affirming her ability to do that, as has been our practice
To issue a declaration.
for the city.
Right. Okay. But declarations themselves differ. Is that correct? In one emergency, I might issue a declaration that says one thing. In a different type of emergency, I might issue a declaration that says another thing. Does that tend to be the case depending on the emergency, that the declaration might differ?
Madam Mayor, and the attorney may want to clarify this further, but declaring it under this authority that's being talked about here for the city allows for responses within the organization that are more tailored to events that involve physical damage to the city environment, whether it's a issue of a train derailment, if it's a terrorist attack, if it's a hurricane. This declaration helps us navigate through altering the union contracts, for example,
Hold on a second.
to
Hold on a
address that in a meaningful way.
You
It
keep
does-
referring to a declaration, and I'm trying to figure, where does a declaration exist right now? You see, there's no
We are
declaration in this
operating-
agenda. There's no
Let me-
declaration that I know that's been drafted at all. Is there a declaration that's been drafted for the mayor to sign?
No, there
Okay.
is not one, and this is clarifying based on your concerns that she doesn't have the right to do that. Under the second part of this resolution, it provides that, as we have been doing, and since a declaration of the city doesn't provide for any additional level of activities that's needed at this time, we are functioning under a state and national declaration, which is recognized by FEMA, for example, as a legitimate way for us to operate to respond to this pandemic, which is affecting people and not buildings.
Okay.
And this is a resolution reaffirming and clarifying that understanding, which you question doesn't exist.
Right. Okay.
And
So-
that's the difference.
okay.
I know it's complicated. I wish it was a little better, but that's why a declaration for the city specifically has not been issued by the mayor.
Okay. So, like, there is no declaration.
There is no, there are just the state and federal declarations cover us.
Oh, we're going to get to that later. Okay. All right. And you said you needed flexibility to be able to respond to certain things because things are happening really quickly, and you can't wait to get direction from a body when things are happening that constitute an emergency. May I ask you, when did you receive correspondence from a commissioner asking for an emergency or special meeting?
I believe last Wednesday.
Okay. I think it was Thursday morning.
Okay, Thursday morning. I apologize.
Okay.
I actually got back from Washington Wednesday night.
So, and I sent you an email
Yes, sir.
asking for an emergency meeting to discuss these issues that you say, you can't wait for a body to wait on. Okay. So what did you tell me over the phone when we spoke? I believe it was Thursday afternoon.
I told you that
Is this an inquisition? I mean,
I'm sorry.
This is interrogation.
You allowed
We had-
me to ask questions. So
5
I'm
minutes.
asking. No. You did not tell Miss Andrea to start the clock, and you did not say that Herman had 5 minutes to ask
Continue with
questions.
your dog
These
and
are-
pony show, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I
Excuse me. When we spoke on the phone in the afternoon, what did you tell me?
I'm running this meeting regardless of how much you want to talk
But
in between.
I
Feel
thought I
free
had
to-
the floor, Madam
You
Mayor.
do, but he was answering your question. So continue on and remember to conduct yourself with respect. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
in response, the best of my recollection, I had just gotten back in town the night before from Washington, D.C. with Commissioner Amoroso, Vice Mayor, and was getting my footing, and we had a conversation about this, and I became agitated with the demand to have a public meeting to talk about issues that we had been already talking about and considering internally with staff, one, and two, understanding from my point of view, holding a public meeting with the CDC regulations and things coming down logistically while we were in the throes of ramping up our response to this pandemic was ill-advised.
Okay.
And I said this is not something we were going to do.
Okay. So I just want to note for the record, you did not mention any CDC guidance on the phone when we spoke.
I didn't mention a lot of things that was going on in the background.
You also mentioned over the phone that you thought it was a bad idea and that
Yes.
you would tell my colleagues as such,
I said I would run it by the colleagues, yes.
and that you would tell them that you thought it was a
I gave them
bad
my
idea.
professional advice based on what I just,
Which was that it was a bad idea.
I said it was, given the things that are happening, to
Okay.
pull together a special meeting, to have conversations for things that we're obviously already in the process of considering internally through our managing of this situation. And also, I did bring up the fact that rules from CDC on social distancing was making things difficult and more difficult for us to have. And you can look around the room. This is not an easy meeting, and it's actually ill-advised in some regards.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that a commissioner asked to create an opportunity for this body to give you direction, okay, and that you didn't think that it was a good idea for the body to give you direction at that time? Is that fair to say?
I had conversations with each commissioners. This is a
Oh,
public
I'm
meeting.
sorry.
They can respond for themselves.
Yeah, but no. I asked you. I said you were asked for a commissioner asked you to create an opportunity for the commission to give you direction.
You had a list of things you
and-
wanted to talk about.
Right, and you did not think it was a good idea for you to take direction from the commission, and the only way that it's legal for you to take direction from the commission, which is in public, in the sunshine, because that's the deliberation of local government is to happen in public. But you can question that aside. You did not want to take that opportunity to take direction from the commission in public at that time. That was last Thursday. Would that be fair to say? You didn't want to create that opportunity to get direction from the commission at that time on Thursday when we spoke.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I think that's a mischaracterization of my intent. I didn't think it was a good idea, given the heat of battle at the time.
So you didn't want to have
the
a meeting.
logistics to have a meeting, which, in effect, if you go back and retrospectively look at the issues, if you had had the meeting and made decisions, they would have been probably decisions we would have had to readjust because of the fact circumstances keep changing from day to day. And secondly, I fully believed at that time as well, Commissioner, that as this is reaffirming, it was well within my authority to address those issues in the processes that we were currently involved in. And so you might have perceived that as I don't value or was trying to disrespect.
Hold on one second.
That's not the case.
I didn't mention that at all.
I
didn't mention that at all.
I believe I have the authorities already
Okay.
to address those issues.
Okay.
And honestly, the topics you brought up as part of what we were already considering
Paid leave for
are not
employees.
bad, are not
One
bad,
at a time, please.
are not bad issues. And they're not things that I think that all of us aren't concerned about. But the ability to implement, process, deal with a special public meeting and all that's going on, and then figure out social distancing and how to do this, and then to do it on a running basis, I thought was ill-advised.
Okay. Thank you. So you didn't want to have a meeting last week, and you had an opportunity to have a meeting, and at that meeting you could have taken direction from the body, and you didn't. Okay. So I've got another question. Actually, this is for Ms.
Point of information.
Sure.
Point of information. We were asked about having a meeting. So he did not take take direction from the committee, from the commission. You just said
I
it.
didn't-
One at a
excuse me.
time, please. It's my floor. Thank you. What you just said was that this commission asked and directed him to have a meeting, and he didn't want to have a meeting. We did not. He polled us each individually, and I purposely said I did not want to have a meeting. It's a danger with my health, with where I am, with the international scenes that are going on right now. It is disingenuous to have a public meeting at this point. And I'd like to ask a question while I'm asking.
I'm
It's a
sorry.
point.
I have
It's a
the
point of information. The point of information is, did we have a public meeting to discuss how we were going to handle Hurricane Dorian? Did we call a special emergency meeting to handle? Did we have that? No, we didn't. Also, is it a violation of sunshine to air your opinions and things on social media when we're not supposed to talk to one another, but isn't airing it publicly in an area? Is that a violation because they're talking about items that are going to be discussed at a public meeting?
Point of information. Isn't conversation between commissioners what's disallowed by the Sunshine Law? So for example, I can say something in a room, I can give a speech, and if a commissioner is present, that's not a violation of Sunshine Law. It would be a violation if the commissioner and I were to go back and forth.
No.
I'm sorry, I asked the attorney. Is it a violation to say in public things that pertain to the city? Because that's what she's saying.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Hardy, you're correct that the
Thank you.
Sunshine Law involves a discussion between two or more commissioners about a matter that will foreseeably come before the commission for consideration.
Correct. So I can, and for example, I've been in the room with the mayor when she has given speeches at neighborhood associations about city matters.
But they were
And
publicly,
excuse me,
they were
I'm
publicly
sorry.
noticed.
I'm sorry. And that wasn't considered a sunshine violation either.
Point of
So,
information, they were publicly noticed. That's the difference.
Actually, that meeting at college, well, we won't go there. Madam Attorney, I have a question for you. I asked for an opinion on two questions. The first question was about Article 3, Section 3 in the charter. I'm sorry, hold on one second.
No, I'm just saying.
okay.
If it goes over 30
Yeah.
minutes, I'm just
Okay.
concerned about it.
The first was about Article 3, Section 3 in the charter. And there's a sentence in here that is the subject of our concern this evening. It says, the mayors shall preside at meetings of the commission, shall be recognized as head of city government for all ceremonial purposes by the governor, for purposes of military law, for civil emergencies, for service process, execution of contracts, deeds, and other documents, and as the city official designated to represent the city in all agreements with other governmental entities or certifications to other governmental entities, but shall have no administrative duties except as required to carry out the responsibilities herein. And so I ask you, how from that do we draw the conclusion that the mayor can declare a state of emergency? It's saying here that she'll be recognized as the head of government in an emergency. But what you're holding is that the mayor, not only once we get an emergency that she's the head of government, but that she gets to decide what an emergency is. How basically is that conclusion drawn from the language, the text that I see between the four corners of this page?
And in my response to you, what I tried to clarify was that historically, even before we became the city attorney, that the use of the mayor to issue his or her own declaration was something that was in practice and has been in practice for a while.
Okay.
And as Pamela Ryan from our office sent to you for Hurricane Irma, she provided you a copy of the declaration that was done.
Right.
It is something that historically has been generated out of the city clerk's office, and the mayor has issued that declaration without a meeting. As to how the original interpretation of that language led to that declaration be done by the mayor himself or herself, I can't answer that question. But as the manager mentioned, based on past practice, and that nobody has ever questioned the mayor's authority to make that declaration, that has been the continued practice of the organization.
Okay. So, I asked for an opinion on Article 3, Section 3 in the charter. And there's a sentence in here that is the subject of our concern this evening. It says, the mayors shall preside at meetings of the commission, shall be recognized as head of government for all ceremonial purposes by the governor, for purposes of military law, for civil emergencies, for service process, execution of contracts, deeds, and other documents, and as the city official designated to represent the city in all agreements with other governmental entities or certifications to other governmental entities, but shall have no administrative duties except as required to carry out the responsibilities herein. And so I ask you, how from that do we draw the conclusion that the mayor can declare a state of emergency? you said that in the response that you sent me, but you also said something else. In the very first sentence, you said the city's charter and code do not provide any specific guidance on how, when, or by whom a state of emergency is declared for the city.
Correct.
Okay. And so the answer that you gave me didn't answer the question that I asked. I asked a question about the interpretation of the charter. I did not ask a question about the history of that provision in the charter's use. You answered the question with an answer about its history. You didn't tell me, you didn't connect that to the language in the charter. So I'm asking, how does the language in the charter vindicate that practice? Because it's possible that people can do things, whether it's proper or not. So just because, it's like saying Jeffrey Dahmer, he might have killed 20 people. He was wrong the first time.
Point of order.
I'm sorry.
Point of order.
It's an analogy. It's like saying
inappropriate.
someone can rob 10 stores and it was wrong the first time, but by the time you get to the 10th, it's okay because it's a practice.
Please.
So please tell me how the language in the charter vindicates the practice.
Madam Mayor.
Please.
And what my first sentence to you, in my opinion, was to explain is that there's no other language in our charter or code that addresses a declaration of emergency.
This doesn't address a declaration of emergency either.
And we have discussed that at length, but what the interpretation is then based on is that there's no other language in the charter or code regarding a declaration of city emergency. So historically, they've relied on this language that I have agreed with you is not clear, but they have historically relied on that language for the mayor to be able to issue the declaration. So the interpretation that I'm providing to you is based on the fact that there's nothing else in the charter or in the code, and I'm looking at it from a historical basis that this is what the city has done.
Okay, so you said something in your response. You said there's no other language dealing with declarations of emergency in the charter or in the code. I didn't see. I read. The word declaration didn't appear one time. There's no language in here about how we recognize as an institution that an emergency is on us.
I don't disagree with you on
Okay.
that. I don't disagree with you. You asked me what my opinion was based on
Right.
the interpretation of that provision, and I'm trying to provide you what that interpretation is.
So right, but I guess I'm getting at is that it appears you didn't interpret the text. You just told me what people have done, and you basically said, well, they've done it, so we're going to do it. And in the resolution, you used the word reaffirm. You said this, whereas the city of Lake Worth Beach desires to reaffirm the mayor's authority to issue a local state of emergency. And again, I'm just going to ask you, where was that affirmed in the first place?
Through history.
It was done.
Through history, before me. This is not something I invented.
So what you're saying is that because someone does something, once they do it, if no one asks any questions, it's therefore proper for them to do it?
I think in the interpretation, you have to look at the past practice and precedent of the city.
Okay,
That's
Madam
what
Attorney,
happened
was
here.
this practice subjected to any review, for example, judicial review? I mean, it would be different if a judge looked at this practice and said, yeah, this is legit, but this hasn't been subject to any review whatsoever.
I don't think anyone's ever brought it up,
Right.
except for now. And I know that in other cities' charters and code, they have very specific provisions.
Right.
And it could certainly be your, prerogative now to move forward with an ordinance that further clarifies this. It's just never come up as an issue as long as we've been city attorney.
Right. So I'm wondering, given that you stated here, the city's charter and code do not provide any specific guidance on how, when, or by whom a state of emergency is declared by the city, it looks like in the absence of anything specific, you're creating a right for a member of the commission to do something that the charter does not say the charter says, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, but it does not say that she can do this. It doesn't even mention the word declare, it doesn't mention the word issue. So from a meaningless ink blot, which is what you appear to recognize it as, you're creating, it would appear, a right that isn't mentioned in the charter and giving it to the mayor.
Commissioner Hardy, we did not create the history
I
behind.
didn't say you created the history, but what you're saying here is that it's been affirmed and we're reaffirming it. But again,
If this commission does not want to reaffirm the mayor's ability or even affirm the mayor's ability to issue the declaration, then that's the commission's desire to do that tonight. And that's why that's in the resolution.
what does the commission's desire have to do with the meaning of the words in the charter?
This, I'm gonna
Oh,
give
one
ev-
second.
I'm gonna, I don't think you can. No, this isn't your meeting.
No, well, Madam Mayor,
This isn't your meeting.
you did some things before the meeting without telling us before we got here
But you're taking advantage of.
to limit the discussion. And
So now you're usurping the whole meeting.
well, you said I have a right to question. And so I'm
But you've
asking
gone-
a question.
you've gone
One last
way
question.
past the amount of
Ms. Gadot, are you
It's the
board
last one.
certified in city, local, county government law? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
In defense of the attorneys, and there's been 4 of them, have spent probably 10 hours.
Can you move the microphone up? Sorry.
Can I get a wipe down? In defense of the attorneys,
Being a wipe.
we've had 4 of them
A wipe.
interrogated and questioned on the same repetitive questions, both on your abilities and my abilities as it pertains to the charter. I think it's been enumerated here tonight adequately by Commissioner.
Point of information, did I interrogate 4 of
Could
our
you please
attorneys?
let him?
There's probably 10 hours of time during this very difficult period when everybody is spending a lot of time, effort, and energy trying to address this pandemic to deal with this college level debate over what the charter has and whether it's legal or not, or the actions that have taken place throughout history. And questioning the attorney on this topic has taken a lot of time, effort, and energy and cost unnecessarily, in my opinion. But more importantly, at the crux of this, and I tried to get to it in my opening statements about what this resolution does, there is a fundamental disagreement over the legal interpretation of the charter and that past practice has any relevance going forward, and that this resolution is, in an opinion, clearly stated, not appropriate. That's not something that the attorney says is either right or wrong, but can be remedied through the adoption of this resolution. And I think the attorneys, when they brought forward this idea of doing a resolution to reaffirm what we have been doing, grant you the authority to move forward and fill those gaps that have existed in the charter that doesn't specifically enumerate every little detail about every little thing that this organization does and doesn't do. And in this case, these are very important ones at a very stressful time, to resolve it through this resolution. So I want to stand in the defense of the attorneys on their opinion and what they have said up to this point. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to try to practice law, but I do take the advice of the attorney, and I would encourage you to do the same.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson.
I thought this was our meeting. This is not,
Sorry, the microphone.
Microphone.
not any one commissioner or even the mayor's individual meeting. It's our meeting. We're meeting as deliberative body. I question the going to a workshop. That is, we have the ability to vote on extending this conversation, I hope. I would like respect for questions that are uncomfortable and maybe even offensive, or we'd rather not have these questions. But when we have to have a conversation based on questions rather than a conversation, it bogs it down a little. I think I had 2 communications about a special meeting. One was very early in this, what was then called a hoax and is now called a war. And I was comfortable with and appreciated the decisions that were made by our staff. The city manager has done a terrific job in those early decisions. We are now going into decisions that are more sweeping and long-term. And we certainly, my concern for not having a meeting was I expressed the need for this meeting. I certainly would rather not be here, but it's important that we continue to have business as best we can. There are degrees of emergency, and this is not a hurricane. This is something that we've never experienced before, and I think that the commission needs to be a part of the decisions, the major long-term decisions going forward. There was a request for a charter review in November, and I don't know what else in the charter that might be questioned, but I think the least we could do is have a charter review blue ribbon committee to look forward to move forward. We need to continue to move forward. It's we do have to continue to do business for the city. The problem I have is with the sunshine law, and when we communicate only through the city manager, I don't know whether we should decide whether if it's a 3-2 response, whether that would constitute bringing it as a public meeting. I think the public deserves to have our thoughts in public. And I think that we need to be respectful on all sides of this issue, because it's sincere and on both sides. But I would like to know how we're going to move. I would like us to talk about how we're going to move forward. Are we going to have these kinds of electronic meetings, or are we going to how are we going to be moving forward? That's what I wanted to talk about tonight. If there's a state of emergency, I think we're there, and we can decide as a body to state that rather than slide into it decision by decision. What is the schedule or the process, or going forward? There's procedures which we need to address and process. It hasn't been easy for anybody, and the public is anxious and full of angst, and we're stocking up on a year's supply of toilet paper, and now there's a run on ammunition and guns. I mean, these are really screwy times, and I would like to try to assure the public, and the mayor's video made a fine attempt at that, I want the public to know that we're working together with staff, with each other, for the betterment of the city. I do want to make some decisions tonight, rather than it isn't a college debate. It isn't a dog and pony show. These are important topics.
City Manager, I'm sorry. Could you state all the different things that we've done since in dealing with things that we've created to try to work with the community in reference to different things and policies?
Madam Mayor and Commission, we've been dealing with a variety of issues over the past week, and my mind, unfortunately, is a little foggy. But they involve such things as facilities closures, limiting and closing basically events, starting with the things that we were planning with St. Patrick's Day Parade, Pride, We've been in consultation with people and organizations, the community, to talk through that and to try to limit people gathering in large groups. First it was 200, then it was 50, and now it's down to 10 and more. We've been actively engaged based on the governor's emergency executive order about the bars and restaurants. The restaurants are to be going down to a 50% capacity and trying to encourage people to do pickups. We issued a press release yesterday about a program that we're working with the restaurants to, if they don't have adequate parking on their spot for people, residents to pick up, that we're going to work with them on using some of the public spaces that adjoin that to facilitate the social distancing while still keeping people employed and people getting a hot meal and getting out of the house. Right now we're grappling with issues dealing with how we're going to do the beach, the public parks. That's an ongoing dialogue we're having with the county. We've adjusted how we're dealing with the employees and the use of their accrual banks. We understand that obviously today, now we've had rules come down from the federal government regarding some of those issues, and we're engaged with the attorneys. Some of the assumptions that we may have made when we made the decision yesterday now maybe are affected, and we're having to make those adjustments in real time. There's a myriad of decisions involving both how we're engaging our employees in working from home. The telecommuting is a great program. Some people are already doing that, but we have equipment issues and how we log those times and all that stuff has to be deployed. How we do our purchases and using purchase cards and tracking the information on what purchases are related to this event specifically, so that in the future, as we come down to FEMA reimbursements, and those regulations, which seem to change every day, we're tracking expenses appropriately so that we can get reimbursed for that. There's things that happen every day, Mayor, and we have been pushing out press releases. We're doing a weekly video, as you've started doing, to talk directly to the public about all the things. We're doing a frequently asked questions push out of information. We're tracking this constantly both on our website, on all our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we're doing press releases with the traditional media. We've been engaged with the media. They call us, and we've been talking about the issues that we're dealing with tonight on, whether or not we should be moving forward with the way we're doing this. So there's been a myriad of things because we are in an emergency mode, and we are functioning under the declarations that were issued by the federal and state government when those occurred last week. We are addressing as best as we can. I want to just finish with this. What you're not seeing a whole lot about right now is operationally, and as a city, we are first and foremost charged with core responsibilities to provide clean water, sewer services, electric utilities, emergency permitting processes, and the removal of debris and trash. Those things are fundamentally and vitally important if we're seeing people quarantined to their homes and restricted in travel. They have to be home and they have to be able to function. Issues of, and we've had a lively debate about when and how we do the disconnects, and that process yesterday, Wednesday, moving forward for a period of time, has been discontinued. There are no utility cutoffs. And that's something that this organization was mirroring what was happening in the market around us. There was the conversations I had with each of you about this topic. And there was differences of opinions I won't go into. Y'all can talk about that. But we all have come together to address, to ease people's minds that we're not going to turn off your utilities through this period of time, because that would be unconscionable. And those kinds of activities.
Point of information. Did people get their utilities turned off on Monday?
Let me finish.
Continue, please.
Let me finish.
Did people get their utilities turned off this week? I asked for a point of information. That's a non-debatable motion. And I'm asking for the information. Did you turn off people's utilities
Point of
this
order.
week?
Yes, and you know
Point
the
of
answer
order.
to that. We
Okay,
did on
the answer is yes.
and
Okay.
Tuesday,
And the policy wasn't in place.
and the policy wasn't in place then because we had not.
Because you didn't want to have a meeting to discuss the
Please.
policy the previous
There was-
week.
We were,
Like, seriously? Like, you're letting this guy stand here and lie to the public.
excuse me, point of order. Point of order, point of order, point of order. I'm going to move on.
Reached the
I don't,
tipping point with
I don't want you guys to go back and forth at all. I just want to say, for the record here, And I want to read these people. So again, there is no power that's going to be shut off. Number one. Number two, that employees will be taken care of and compensated throughout all of the situation that I had mentioned in my speech. Other items that are going on. We are following, as you said, we are legally under the state and federal declaration of emergency and operating as such, and have been operating as such.
And we're doing all this, Madam Mayor, with consulting with y'all.
Correct. And
It's
in
not
addition,
backing.
in addition to that, I wanted to ask a question. Do other cities, now other cities I know that declare states of emergency, they do so because they have their own fire rescue, they have their own police department. We have, along with our own emergency plans that we go through any emergency situation. PBSO has its own emergency plans, do they not?
Madam Mayor, we operate under unified command structure on the NIMS model. And as part of that, our contract police services through PBSO provides the other critical functions, which is our responsibility as a city to ensure policing activities and law enforcement. PBSO handles that. They are well-resourced, and they are at the table with us on a regular basis. And Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, who provides emergency medical services and fire protection, which is the other thing that's our responsibility as a city, as a fundamental core critical function. And they do a great job, and they're part of our overall command structure. Yes.
Okay, I have another question for you and maybe for Christy. The other question that I have for you is, it was asserted before that we have different states of emergencies. There's not one. We have one protocol for a state of emergency address, and it does address the unions in regards to it, and it basically addresses the protocol and change in pay for unions due to a hurricane scenario. Is that not correct?
And additionally, if I can, contract services that we rely on related to those cleanup functions and activities as well.
Correct.
Falls under those provisions and directly relates to the requirements of FEMA.
Going through this paperwork, going through this process as we start to discover things that we like or don't like in reference to it. And I appreciate your charter challenges and things of that. I didn't make these rules, and I'm certainly not sitting here, wishing to even be at the center of this discussion or have you assert these lies towards me. But in addition to that, they never came up with a different approach for each different kind. They never anticipated a pandemic. They never anticipated a whatever. There's only one approach, and it involves calling into action your police, calling into action your fire, calling into action employees in special circumstances to create public safety measures and get the power back on and do all kinds of things of that nature. It was not addressing something such as a pandemic. It was not addressing anything like that from what I had read through it. And it would change the circumstances and severely affect the budget of this city in declaring a state of emergency, in my personal opinion.
Point of information, what did you read through, Madam Mayor?
Why is it questionable?
First of all,
No,
I'm not even.
You were saying that something didn't address these issues that you're talking about. What was the something that you
The Declaration of Emergencies.
What declaration of emergency? Like there's no declaration of emergency.
Yes, there is a declaration of emergency.
Right now, here?
No, we have not called a declaration. In the past, when we call a declaration of
about
emergency,
previous declarations.
Previous declaration.
Previous emergency.
I'm not going back and forth with you. That's not how we run a meeting, and you know Robert's rules. Enough. Enough.
I've had enough of everyone.
Well, you know what? You are completely. You want your own rules. You want your own things. You want your own questions. You want to change the books. You want to change that. You know what? Put an agenda. Put an agenda item. It's
and
mine.
you announced it on the dais, and you changed them unilaterally, even though our rules don't give you the ability to do that.
I was giving you an opportunity. Goodness gracious! Should I ever give you an opening again? I'm sure you will take advantage of the situation completely. In the meantime, I'm going to go to public comments because this is just completely out of control. Dear Commissioners, I'm calling on you to provide strong leadership in this time. I'm sorry. This is Penny Darling, 1701 North D Street. Dear Commissioners, I'm calling on you to provide strong leadership in this time of public health emergency. Please declare a state of emergency for the city of Lake Worth Beach and achieve the following: enacting a moratorium on utility shutoffs, curtail Operation Red Tag, extend paid emergency leave to city employees who must be out of work, ban gatherings of large groups of people, mandate the restaurants and bars operate at half capacity or use emergency powers to shut them down completely. Reach out to the health department and ICE about protections for undocumented residents who may test positive for the disease. Thank you for your consideration. Cheryl Rashkin, did you want to speak? Okay. Cheryl Rashkin, 1302 South Palmway. Madam Mayor, Commissioners, City staff, good evening. Even though I concur with the issuing of this resolution to allow the mayor and city manager to, quote, do their jobs, I think that maybe it should be more inclusive of other such emergencies that might befall the city in the future. For the city manager's job to be stalled in providing safety measures to the residents and visitors of Lake Worth Beach is not of our best interest. Allowing the suspension, cancellation, or non-scheduling of essential meetings events should be inclusive in that job description for all emergent events befalling our city with the concurrence of the mayor. Since that person is hired, fired through your auspices, you must have faith in their good judgment to proceed with the utmost respect for the city's well-being. Thank you. Noam Brown, 1701 North D Street. I'm writing this evening because it's come to my attention that the city is making decisions that are not in line with the current situation we're facing surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. The time for astute, informed, bold action was really a week ago already, and if today the city is making ill-informed decisions and asking that those concerned should simply calm down, then we as a city are way behind the curve. Right now, priority one should be doing what we can to slow the spread of the coronavirus, so I'm urging you to do the following. City should declare a state of emergency tonight. Enact a moratorium on utility shutoffs. Mr. Kelly from the city manager's office informed me that this is already in place, but in that case, it's not accurate. Please enact it immediately. Stop red tagging and towing vehicles. Extend paid emergency leave to non-essential employees who cannot telecommute. Ban large gatherings of people. Mandate that restaurants and bars operate at half capacity or shut them down completely for now. Reach out to the health department and ICE about protections for undocumented residents who may test positive for COVID-19. As elected officials, it's important that you take this pandemic seriously and realize that the health and safety of each and everyone affects each and everyone indiscriminately. This is the time to show leadership grounded in facts and guidance from scientific experts. This is from Rachel Kajewski, 1510 North D Street. Starting today, the city has stated that they will end utility shutoffs, noting the dire need many residents have for electricity and water, which is excellent. However, I was informed that during Tuesday alone, over 50 places had their utilities shut off. If the city is serious about supporting its community members, it needs to do more than offer to reactivate the 50 places that were shut off on Tuesday, but they need to retroactively turn on all utilities which contain residents living in them. It's also critical the city does not use this statewide emergency to go on a spree of red tagging and towing vehicles across the city. This also must be suspended if the city decides to declare a state of emergency. I think a curfew is counterproductive and a waste of human resources. Thank you. Thank you. This is from Sue Stevens, Welch, 1331 North Palmway. Thank you for our city workers for showing up to work, collecting our garbage, and keeping our streets clean. To our commission and city manager, please halt all utility and code fines and evictions. We have a global crisis. All people need assurance that their housing and utilities and food sources are secure. Assistance programs are under duress. As a taxpayer and a Lake Worth Beach resident, I realize the ramifications of the economic ramifications, and I urge you, Mike, and the commission to ensure we all have safe sources of water, consistent in electricity and housing. This is a time for us to show up and support each other. Please follow suit as the federal government has, despite the costs. Matthew Mugalan Paguth Arivalan, 1510 North D Street. There are a lot of misconceptions around the COVID-19 epidemic. Addressing safety around COVID-19 mostly involves personal responsibility. Usage of emergency powers by local, state, and federal governments only complicates the issue and does not help in any way. Curfews prevent ordinary working-class people from having to access their basic needs. It limits people's freedom, so the city should not consider declaring curfews. The rich and powerful have hoarded lots of basic supplies and essentials. Working-class people and the underprivileged are still struggling to have access to basic needs on a daily basis. So this basically creates a power dynamic in our communities where the poor are left in an unsurvivable situation. It will only lead to chaos. This is Nick Palugi, 429 North D Street. South Florida is emerging as one of the likeliest epicenters of COVID-19, according to the health mapping website healthweather.us, which has outflanked the yearly CDC mapping for a few years now for flu-like symptoms in the U.S. If you look at our county, you can see that symptoms are going parabolic compared to yearly averages. Despite this fact, city officials have continued to put public safety at risk by cutting off utilities, allowing crowded bars and restaurants to stay open, blocking an emergency meeting that was called to address these, continuing to put red tag tow notices on vehicles, failing to provide clear leadership and instead stepping back and following bare minimum protocol during a major crisis, aka let Bornstein take care of it, end quote. There is obviously a serious void in leadership at the state and national level. Therefore, it's up to leadership at a local level to compensate and use everything at their disposal to prepare people for what's about to happen. The crowded bars and restaurants downtown clearly show this is not happening here. That code enforcement is out today. Red tagging vehicles shows this is not happening here. That you shut off people's utilities show this is not happening here. Lake Worth has a high rate of poverty. There are thousands of people who are only one or two paychecks away from the financial ruin. For the city to shut off 105 family utilities and continue to put tow notices on people's vehicles who will shortly be out of a paycheck is totally heartless, not to mention dangerous for everybody. The immense financial and psychological pressure that low-income people are under right now, sent home from work and with kids out of school, will only increase in the coming weeks. It's a powder keg. So far, the actions of city officials are only pouring fuel onto the fire. Are you timing these individually? You need to be.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Jessica Shaw, 219 3rd Avenue South. I'm very concerned that at the lack of social distancing I've seen at the beach and on the avenue. Epidemiologists agree that this will lead to a spike in cases that will overwhelm our medical capabilities. When can we see a plan that will take this threat seriously? If this doesn't change, our emergency systems will be quickly overloaded. We have a few urgent care clinics in our town. Can we make a plan as a city to support them in the coming weeks and months? Kimberly Stokes, 1321 North L Street. I would like to see the city take a more active role in protecting and caring for its citizens in this time of crisis. I think it's unconscionable to be penalizing residents by shutting off their utilities. Everyone should have access to power and water to ensure that they can stay healthy and safe. I also think that during this time of financial uncertainty for many of our families, the added burden of having to deal with code violations right now is horrific. Unless the violation is a matter of public safety, they should be put on hold to allow everyone the ability to focus on what matters most. I also think the city needs to consider what business should be allowed to stay open at this time. I'm not sure why an emergency meeting was denied. There's an obvious need to address these very serious issues. This is from Diane Freeney. I have no address for her. Okay. Mayor Pam and esteemed commissioners, this agenda once again makes a laughing stock out of the city of Lake Worth. The United States of America is a coronavirus emergency. The White House Coronavirus Task Force, led by President Trump and VP Pence, are updating the American public daily on the coronavirus progress in research, supplies, diagnosed cases, procedures, and individuals and businesses that follow to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus on the American people. The White House Coronavirus Task Force has assigned responsibility on the state level to the state governor. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is on top of it and is doing an amazing job. The elected officials on DeSantis' team, which is all elected officials, this is a bipartisan effort, are all singing from the same songbook. I've corresponded with some of them, and their response is quick, accurate, and respectful. Governor DeSantis is in charge. I take my orders from him. Until I hear differently, I will continue doing the job I was elected to do. The White House Task Force has said the community will solve the coronavirus emergency and create new rules for dealing with future pandemics and other emergencies. The community has responded. I'm out in the community every day the folks on the front line struggling to do a better job for their clients, friends, and neighbors. Kudos for the community. And the city of Lake Worth Beach keeps rowing in a different direction. The consent agenda is a disgrace. Nothing to do with the coronavirus emergency, and grants are quickly becoming obsolete. Looking for grants to be canceled soon to redirect funds to direct service programs, medical, housing, and food for children and families. So now is the time to kick the can down the road. By June 2020, my hope is that we will all have good news. If not, we can kink the can down the road again. In the meantime, I suggest that the city manager declare success and move on, and the mayor and esteemed commissioners turn back the clock and become volunteers. The saving in their salaries, payroll taxes, and benefits can be reassigned to a city fund for city residents who have found themselves. Okay. Next is Tiffany Griffiths, 1021 North Palm Way, enacting a moratorium on utility shutoffs and declaring a state of emergency. Deborah Islis, 330 South M Street. We need to have a system of checks and balances in place. Sienna Mayers, 429 North D Street. According to the Palm Beach Post, Omari requested an emergency meeting a week ago that was shot down with a condescending remark from Lake Worth City Manager Michael Bornstein. Instead, Bornstein's response to the current crisis we find ourselves was a continuation of business as usual. Lake Worth bars were full on St. Patrick's Day, despite a national call from the CDC not to congregate in groups of 10 or more. Yep. To add insult to injury, in the last several days, the city discontinued to disconnect people's utilities and to do such non-essential government activities at the highly unpopular and unnecessarily punitive Operation Red Tag. FPL has suspended utility shutdowns, and the DMV has granted extensions for upcoming expiration dates. Why is Lake Worth, home of so many working-class people, so out of touch? Many people in our community are facing unemployment, bankruptcy, and foreclosure, and your delayed response is as best shameful as worse, perhaps fatal for some. Dustin Zacks, 216 North Federal Highway, number 4. Please read. I agree with great dismay that very personal statements made by City Manager Bornstein about Commissioner Hardy in the Palm Beach Post on March 13th. I am still trying to figure out how asking routine questions like whether our city workers will get additional paid leave during the crisis or whether we will shut water or power off results in literal name-calling in the press. I am certain that all of you are under immense stress during this time, particularly Mr. Bornstein, but I see little excuse for the kind of nasty, personal, generational condensation I read in the Palm Beach Post, regardless of whether we ultimately agree on policy or not. Matthew, no cats. Matthew Pugalin Puguth Arivalan. There are lots of misinformation about COVID-19. Curfews would only make things more complicated. City should not use its emergency powers to declare any form of curfew. And one more. I'm sorry. Sylvia Ball, would you like to come up?
Don't you get a clean rag for each one?
That's a new one. That's a new one each time. You want to pull it down? There you go.
Yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with all this emergency thing. It's just the regular law that I'm concerned about. And it has been going on before all this emergency came. It's about the street parking. I always thought the law required people to park with a flow of traffic on two-way streets and one-way streets as a safety measure. And where I live, we have trouble with people not doing that. And if the city can't do it at night or on the weekends, then shouldn't the sheriffs be able to help us, put warnings or tickets or whatever to help teach the people? Because I think some of them do not know. But there are also some that just don't want to do it. They just want to make up their own laws, as I had an experience with a neighbor boy. And the section I'm in, it's really bad, the people. And I called the sheriff one night, and I was shocked because their response is that no one was impeding traffic. And I hadn't called about anyone impeding traffic. I called about them parking in the wrong direction. There were 3 different vehicles, one right across from where I am, and 2 more down the street, going every which way, on the wrong sides of the street. And I didn't know what he meant by impeding traffic. And if they are changing the law, most people park with the flow of traffic. So why are we doing it? If they're saying that if you're not out in the middle of the street blocking traffic, you can park any which way you want to. And if they're not warning the people or ticketing the people, what is the law? Why are we parking with the flow of traffic if the sheriffs aren't backing us up? And, I was a little...
Time.
Okay. Thank you very much. (1246) 18th Avenue. Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'm sorry.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Oh, okay.
And the motion is?
Motion to approve.
To approve the resolution.
Do we want to make any specifics?
My
Before we go, I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion on the
Second.
floor and a second. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Robinson.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of state of emergency at this point. I think going forward, we need to definitely improve the communication, at least among ourselves, directed from you, Madam Mayor, not to question, but to have an understanding of what the city manager is doing in the future. This is an extreme situation, and a state of emergency should be a little more detail than just giving carte blanche to saying we have a state of emergency. And as far as so I had my light on to make a motion to have a state of emergency, and I'm hoping we have some more conversation about it. But I don't want the city to ignore what was supposed to be a reasonable approach to abandoned cars, shopping carts, and I think we should at least recognize that city employees and city commissioners should not be traveling in airplanes, at least. We implore our citizens, all of us, to take personal responsibility. There will be bad apples, but we have to take responsibility for our own health and safety too. So I'm voting yes for a state of emergency, but I want a little more detail in the motion.
City manager, question. If we declared a state of emergency currently, based on on the way in which it was done in the past, thank you. When I was starting to mention before everything got a hooey. Excuse me.
You should have gloves on.
I know. That we don't have different states of emergencies. We only use one. Is that correct? I'm asking the city manager.
There's basically a declaration of emergency that you would issue.
Right.
That would cover what we're dealing with,
Right.
and it would be issued by you if warranted.
Okay, and what happens after that, based on what our current contracts and things that we have within the city? What happens when we declare a state of emergency?
It would complicate some of our contract agreements that we have, as I understand it, with the unions, and how we deal with some of the pay issues potentially. And at this point in time, it really wouldn't add any value to what we're already doing, other than to say the city issued a state of emergency. And I would refer to the, is Juan listening out there too? Or if the city attorney has any additional
Point of
point
information.
to do that, but
What is the word? You said it will complicate our situation with contracts and with the unions. Can you clarify? You said complicate. What does that mean?
there's verbiage that says when the city issues a declaration of emergency, certain things happen.
Which
And
is?
I'd have to, it's mentioned in our union contracts, and
You'd have to pay them more.
That's
right?
a potential downside to it, yes. Because it's intended for their time to be spent repairing physical damage in, for example, extra shifts and activities related to things like hurricanes. It's not intended to address what we're dealing with right now, which is people are going to be getting sick as the outfall of this, and how we address all those issues related to that can be handled under the direct declarations of emergency as issued by the federal and state governments. The two are different.
Point of information.
The intention of the two are different, and the desire just to have the title that the city has declared a state of emergency doesn't add anything to what we're already capable of doing and are doing and have been doing. And that's the point.
Point of information. You said it was intended because the employees would have to do things like clear debris and all this stuff and, make sure that the place is safe. Is it not also intended to compensate them for the fact that they're working in a potentially dangerous environment in an emergency?
Danger is defined under the way we use declarations of emergency is more in line with activities related to physical damage in the work environment.
Point of information.
This
Is-
differentiates
is
the
it-
city from other cities.
Is the coronavirus not dangerous?
I'm not arguing that point, Commissioner. I'm giving you the answer. I know you don't like the answer and you want to argue with me on it.
Okay.
I have stated this 3 times the same thing. It is what and how we operate.
Okay.
Mayor, I hope that answers your question adequately.
Commissioner Robinson, did you have a follow-up?
Well, I was just going to say this is almost in reverse of union contracts, that we will probably be sending people home for their own safety rather than asking them to come in and do extra work.
Correct.
I would hope that the unions
Madam Mayor,
work with us.
to Commissioner Robinson's point, under the current declarations, we have the ability to, for example, allow people who are dealing with the coronavirus either in self-quarantine or they are sick or they have been affected by a family member they're taking care of, to not draw against their accruals. That was something we were looking at. Now it's being complicated, I understand, potentially by what the federal government's done. So that's not a clear shot. But that was a decision we were able to make under the operational authority of me as the chief executive officer, and that's something we were doing. It doesn't require the mayor to invoke a declaration of emergency for the city to do that.
I want better communication in some of your long-term, long effect decisions. When you stop a board meeting, that's good. But when you start affecting things that will be historically recorded and used as that's the way we did it, or back when we had a state of emergency, it's not in writing, but we did it. That's the way we did it. Makes it right. Doesn't make it right. I want to be able to be a part to share some of the, because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I think we're all in this together, and just, if we can lighten the damning and the, of doing right and wrong, because not everything you do is beyond question. But it's been pretty good so far. That's all. I just think, we need to act in concert.
I think that this whole process is showing us the flaws in the system and where things have to be tightened up in reference to legalities too. So I think having the conversations and talking about these things is not the problem. It's also in reference to how we phrase it. We're going through, and this isn't a kumbaya moment, but we're going through a really hard time right now. Everybody is, and I could sit here and make you cry with half the things I've heard or half the things I'm going through right now personally. And this isn't time for that. It's to look at everybody on a whole right now and to offer some consolation and try to do the right things. As cities and towns, we follow each other and we try to coordinate and do things with it. Maybe we didn't act as fast as we could have in certain situations, but we certainly can create legislation or additions to things that will help us to communicate better, to phrase things better, to do whatever. But it isn't some sort of conspiracy theory, and it isn't some sort of disrespect for things. If we have to make these changes, then we should bring back the ordinances, and we should bring back some of these issues so that we can address them. We might want to talk about it in our next bargaining, union bargaining sessions, to talk about this and create different types of emergency declarations to where there is, so that it spells out this thing and we're not forced, to do something that could possibly endanger the city. I mean, we just went through the budget process. We all know how light that is. So I just, Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to give my 2 cents. So, first, I want to thank the residents for being involved and self-quarantining, and it's unique to us, and it's something we haven't seen. So, I want to thank staff, Michael and his staff, and the Palm Beach Post and the Lake Worth Herald for getting the right information out, because there's so many different miscommunications out there on social media. Christy, and your department, I'd like to talk about the budget for a moment, and at some point in the future, talk about what the hours look like with your department for all the overtime for being sideswiped there, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion. But I want to thank the staff. We've been working with most of the staff, senior staff, for the last 8 years, and it's been questioned that just because we've done it this way, is it the right way? We've dealt with a lot of different things. We wrote over hundreds and hundreds of ordinances when we first got elected, just so we could talk to each other. So we're still, every day when something like this pops up, we have to deal with it. It's new. I have no problem with letting the mayor take the lead. She, in my opinion, is the lead. And I can assure you that on behalf of myself, I'm very involved. I know exactly what staff's doing. I have conversations with them on a regular basis. I don't get in fights with them. I don't hang up on them. That's how you do business. And we've done it for the last 8+ years. And working with our partner cities around Palm Beach County, we've done a good job. And the vision of Lake Worth and what you see in and around Lake Worth shows that. Can we do better? There's always things that pop up that we can do better on, and I call the question.
I'm sorry, that's not how this works. We each have an opportunity to speak 5 minutes.
I thought we did.
Yeah, the question's been
I'm
called.
sorry. No, I'm sorry. And that's not how calling the question works. You need a second, and you need to vote on it.
Then I have a second for calling
So
the question.
are you telling me that you're going to keep me from talking right now?
You've talked all evening.
Look here. You're calling me disrespectful because I've interrupted people, but this gentleman has turned off people's lights in the middle of a global health pandemic. That's what that gentleman did.
Point of order.
And you think I'm disrespectful for interrupting you?
Point of order.
This gentleman has had the ability to do any number of things. We could have banned large gatherings. We could have closed the beach. We could have put a moratorium on utility shutoffs.
I recessed.
Also not within your power, and the attorney has held that that's true.
I recessed the meeting.
You came up with new rules at the beginning of the meeting, and then you didn't even want to follow the rules that you came up with.
And you took advantage.
This is a banana republic is what you're turning this place into with your so-called leadership.
Does a recess mean that we will be?
Yes.
Camera on that?
I don't care anything about this.
On that?
I don't care anything about this.
Does
We
it-
should have been talking about this last week.
Can we?
We cut off people's utilities this week and made them pay what could have been their last check to us to turn their lights on in the global health pandemic. But you don't care about that, and you didn't want to meet. But every other year, you go around and beg people for their votes.
Hey.
Can we explain
But
the
you care more
recess?
about your relationship with that guy than you care about the relationship with the people who don't go to work in this building.
Order! You were done. You're done. You're done. Disrespect.
It's disrespectful is what you've done to the working people in the city.
I didn't do anything.
You failed to act.
I didn't do anything.
When you're a leader, you failed to act. You said you didn't do anything. You failed to act when you had an opportunity.
Party for State House.
I don't care anything about that. You think anybody cares?
Does a recess mean that we can reconvene tonight, or? Okay. Is that in 5 minutes, or?
It's when the chair comes back.
It's incredibly embarrassing. Personally offended, professionally offended.
I am too. I have never seen this.
I have acted within consultations.
Are we still?
Taking care of.
Are we still?
I don't give.
Well, no. I wanted to know.
I'm too involved in
We are not in a meeting.
the city. Y'all don't reprimand him.
7:52, we're live.
Okay, we were going to rejoin our special city meeting. The question was called before we recessed, but I also noting my rules at the beginning, I had said that everyone had 5 minutes to talk. Some people were given more than 5 minutes to talk, but I know that the Vice Mayor Pro Tem is the only person who wasn't given any time whatsoever to speak. So we have a question being called on the floor. Did you want to speak just because I had omitted your chance to have your 5 minutes?
So I can just speak about what I need to
For
speak?
5 minutes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to comment tonight. I thought that our business here tonight was pretty straightforward. I thought our business tonight was probably unnecessary. You know, I have the distinct pleasure, if you will, of having been here through a number of hurricane seasons. Probably, I don't know, 12 or 13, I'm not sure how many. But I also have the pleasure of having served here during 9/11. Okay, and I got to tell you folks, we're doing the relationship between the city manager and his duties, or her duties, and this body as a policymaker has not deviated one bit in all these years. You know, the debate over whether or not we should have a city emergency or not a city emergency, I think, is moot. But for the record, in 2017, I did a little research we call the city emergency, and nobody challenged in 2017
You didn't notify us.
the powers of the city manager.
Quiet, please.
And nobody challenged the powers of the mayor. I think that we do live in a very different time. And yes, this pandemic is extremely serious, and none of us should take it lightly on any level. But I will tell you this. I've had constant contact with the administration of this organization, and I'm very pleased with what I'm hearing. These folks are working day and night, rolling with the punches, rolling with the new information as it becomes available to them, making the best possible operational decisions possible. That is their role. We have a city manager commissioned form of government. The city manager and his staff are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city. We, as an elected body, are policymakers. I have seen nothing at this point that requires the city to step up and craft policy for what we need to be doing under these most immediate circumstances. Many of the issues I've read about in the paper, the concerns that I've read about in the paper, be it utility shutoffs or compensation for employees, whatever the case may be, I want to remind everybody that many of these, if not all of these, have been addressed previous in emergency operations planning. That this organization, every organization throughout Palm Beach County and the rest of the United States goes through on an annual basis. So while the nature of our emergency is different, much of the roles and the things that we need to do are constant. And each of us has a role to play in that scenario. In fact, I think the city manager mentioned earlier, was it the DEMS training? DEMS training. You know, that training is available to each of us as elected officials. I personally have taken some of the basic training courses and understand the very basics of emergency management. And that is, once an emergency is declared, okay, there is a distinct chain of command. And those of us who are elected officials, unless we are certified to be part of that chain of command, do not interfere unless it's a policy decision that has to be crafted. I think it's, and I'm just going to say it, I really didn't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. I think that at a time where we need calm in our community, a time where we need good, effective, straightforward communication, we're sitting here debating on the definition of our charter. We are causing confusion amongst some of our residents who are questioning, well, gee, are they really doing things the way they're supposed to be doing? Well, of course we are. We are absolutely doing what we're supposed to be doing. You're causing confusion. You're causing division in the community, okay, in a time of emergency. And I can't find anything more egregious than that. I think that whatever situation that may exist between the city manager and any one of the five of us up here should be dealt with, you know, on a one-on-one basis, and not
In the newspaper?
not in the newspaper. Thank you very much.
One at a time, please.
And not on Channel 5 or 12 or anything else. I think it's important that the city residents understand that they're in very, very good hands right now. We have a competent team of professionals at all levels that are making the best possible decisions on an hour-by-hour basis. Okay? And I have no reason to suspect or question at this point any of the decisions that are being made. We are certainly concerned about the health, safety, and well-being of every one of our residents. The issue of utilities being turned off. This health emergency notwithstanding, there's always been an opportunity for folks who've had their utilities turned off to work things out. And there are agencies and/or things that we can work through administratively. And if with all due respect, I'm going to take a little bit extra time because I think there's been extra time afforded to others.
Small.
Small what? Don't say small. I think that, you know, things have been happening so rapidly to stand up here and suggest that we've turned people's electric off.
We have.
In a cold and callous manner, and I'll expect you to remain silent as I remained silent while you spoke.
You remain silent on
Oh,
Thursday,
please,
too.
please.
So to reiterate, I didn't have any intentions of commenting tonight because this is a sensitive subject for some people, and it's an inflammatory subject that's intentionally being, you know, whipped up in some parts of our city. I just want to reiterate, again, I've had the benefit and the honor of serving this community through many hurricanes and 9/11. Okay, and every emergency is a little bit different than the previous one, but I'm perfectly comfortable with what we're doing right now, and we will adapt. And we will make the best possible decisions we need to make going forward. No one's utilities are going to be turned off. That's already been stated. Okay, that's already been stated. And as far as red tagging and the other things that your friends and constituents wrote in about this evening, all these things, there are probably thousands of things that this administration has to think about policy-wise, procedural-wise, that they have to get to. And there's only 24 hours in a day. So it's a matter of prioritizing what things they address today, this hour, and this evening, and tomorrow afternoon. So with that said, again, I hope again, I'm trying to speak from my heart. I'm trying not to, you know, create any more divisiveness that already exists. But I want to tell you that I'm very proud to be part of this organization. I'm very proud of our staff. And I thank them all, as Commissioner Amoroso has already stated. And I'm especially proud of our residents who have shown nothing but, what's the word I'm looking for? Self-discipline and responsibility, personal responsibility. We don't have people out in the community, you know, rioting or doing crazy things. Everybody's being respectful of the situation that's at hand, and everybody's helping each other. I've been in contact with a number of church leaders. We've talked back and forth. I have neighborhood groups that are talking about doing certain things. So this community will be resilient, and this community will deal with and adapt whatever we have, in any way we have to in this health crisis. And again, I apologize if I'm not well prepared and well heeled for these comments, but I think we're in very good shape. And I thank the city manager and his staff, and I thank my colleagues up here for their leadership.
We've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1.
We've made a joke of our.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, first, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by
Council.
the Vice Mayor. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
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 We're done.
Good night, everybody.
When will our next meeting occur?
The city manager has to call.